Hey everyone, have you ever wondered how a city packed with millions of people can feel so, well, quiet, so incredibly orderly? Today, we're going to dive into the invisible rules that hold Japanese society together. It's a system of social coordination that's absolutely fascinating and, let's be honest, a little bit mysterious to outsiders.
So it really gets you thinking, right? What if the most important social contract isn't something written down in laws at all? What if it's actually practiced in millions of tiny, everyday interactions between people? That question feels more urgent than ever. We're living in a world that often feels so loud and chaotic, where public spaces are tense and disagreements can turn toxic in a second. Japan gives us a fascinating alternative to look at, a real-life case study in social harmony that's built on a completely different foundation.
And that foundation is built on this idea called practiced social intelligence. Now, this isn't some kind of magic, and it's definitely not an innate trait people are born with. No, it's a learned skill. It's the sum of countless small, conscious choices people make every single day to minimize friction and build trust, even with total strangers.
Okay, so this brings us to our first big idea. And it's a bit of a paradox, so stick with me here. It's the idea that true freedom might not be found in just doing whatever you want, but in shared restraint and coordination. This chart really highlights two fundamentally different ways of thinking about freedom. On one hand, you've got freedom as expansion. The idea of having a louder voice, asserting yourself, maybe even resisting the rules. But the model we see in Japan is more about freedom as coordination. And that is built on mutual adjustment and a deep, unspoken trust that everybody is going to play their part.
This concept is just so perfectly captured by this idea of social choreography. Think about it. It's not about suppressing yourself. It's about making things work. If everyone on a crowded street just insists on their own path without looking at anyone else, you get total gridlock. Nobody moves. But when people anticipate each other's movements, suddenly everyone is free to get where they're going.
And this coordination creates a type of freedom we almost never talk about, psychological freedom. When you can trust that people aren't going to be constantly invading your space, your time, or your attention, you don't have to walk around in a constant state of self-defense. And that right there frees up an incredible amount of your mental and emotional energy.
All right, so if everyone is coordinating with each other, that naturally leads us to our second theme, this deep cultural focus on prioritizing harmony over individual victory. And we see this play out in public spaces and in how people handle disagreements. It all starts with a huge shift in perspective. A train, a sidewalk, a public park, these aren't just neutral zones where anything goes. In Japan, they're treated more like a communal living room. It's a shared space that everyone has a moral responsibility to help take care of.
And you can think of it like a ripple effect. This sense of consideration starts at home. You learn to care for your own room. That habit then naturally extends to the train you ride to work, and then it scales outward to the entire city. It's not about top-down control. It's a habit of respect that just grows.
So what is all this care actually protecting? Well, it's protecting the invisible but absolutely essential resources of city life. Your time, your attention, your sense of safety, and your basic dignity. These small, coordinated behaviors create this fragile but vital social infrastructure that benefits literally everyone. Of course, being harmonious when you're just walking around is one thing, but what happens when people have a real disagreement? Does this system just force everyone to suppress any kind of conflict? Well, there's this fantastic analogy for it. Disagreement is treated like surgery. It's not that conflict doesn't happen, but when it does, it's approached with the seriousness and precision of a medical procedure. You do it carefully, for a specific purpose, and with the ultimate goal of healing, not just winning an argument for sport. And that really gets to the heart of it. Instead of being a battle for domination, disagreement becomes a way to test ideas while preserving the relationship. The goal isn't some short-term victory that leaves a trail of destruction behind it. The goal is to make sure that everyone can continue to coexist and work together long after the argument is over.
And all of this, the coordination, the harmony, it all points to our final theme. A deep, quiet kind of cultural confidence that doesn't need aggression or hostility to assert itself.
This is such a powerful insight. An identity is at its absolute weakest when it needs an enemy to feel strong. When a culture is truly secure in itself, it doesn't need to define itself by what it's against. And that security is exactly what allows for this remarkable sense of openness. And we see this openness in action through this amazing process of localizing instead of just imitating.
Japan has basically mastered the art of taking foreign ideas, foods, and customs, and thoughtfully adapting them, translating them to fit the local culture. This lets the culture absorb all these new influences without ever losing its core identity.
Ultimately, this is an incredibly powerful form of soft power. This kind of confidence doesn't need to shout about how great it is. It attracts people through its consistency, its beauty, and its internal logic, not through force or pressure.
Now, it is so important to say that the goal here isn't to hold up Japanese society as some kind of utopia, because no society is perfect. The real lesson here is about practice. These aren't magical traits, they are skills, and they've been honed over centuries through conscious daily effort.
And that really just leaves us with an invitation to think about how these ideas might apply in our own lives. What if we focused a little bit more on protecting the shared spaces between us? What if we tried to build a version of freedom where, for us to win, someone else doesn't have to lose? It's a quiet idea for sure, but it just might change everything.